Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of The Third Floor. My name's Joe, and today I got Jake,
Hello there, it is me, Jake.
Justin,
Hello there, it is me, Justin. Thank you guys for
and
having me
Lee.
back.
Dang, I didn't expect that to come out.
All right.
I was expecting the lines.
Thank you for
All right.
having. All right.
What? Everyone always did the hello there. They copied. So right when I heard the line come out, I was ready to
you were the
go.
Ellen
I could tell you,
DeGeneres of hosting.
you would want a little more from me. I gave it.
Oh, great.
Oh man.
Oh,
All right.
are we still going with this one?
Yeah,
already?
Just go.
All right, Lee, you're here too.
Yep.
All right. So, in the long history of cinema, TV, entertainment, there's been very few villains that have made the masses just enthralled by them. If they were scared by them, if they enjoyed watching them, if they agreed with them, very few villains out there that take the cake as the best villains in history. Today, us on the third floor are going to try to compile a list of the 4 greatest villains of all time. And to start us off, we're going with Lee.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me, Joe. Please don't interrupt like you did Justin.
All right, that's enough from Lee. Thank you.
Okay. So when I think of a villain, I think of a few things. Specifically, number one, presence. Whether that be physically, whether that be their direction in terms of the plot of the story, their motives, if they're right or wrong, if they can not only be intimidating, but they can also change our protagonist's perspective on a certain topic, and also how they challenge the heroes and the method in which they do so. And this might sound like the easy answer, but it's only because, or the obvious answer, but it's only because it's absolutely the right answer, and that was Thanos in 2018's Infinity War. So, for those of you that haven't seen it, which shouldn't be a lot, Thanos was the main antagonist not only in Infinity War, but collectively the entire MCU Infinity Saga, which obviously was the biggest cinematic event probably in our lifetime, if not all of history, and absolutely needed to stick the landing. And the most essential part of that was the character of Thanos, because we all knew the Avengers were as a team. They work as individual movies. However, in order to have an event like this, a cinematic event like this, we needed a character to challenge them. And from the opening scene of Thanos decimating the Asgardians all the way until him collecting the Infinity Stones, sacrificing more than any of the Avengers had, and having not only the strength but the will to do what he believed was right, even when everyone else was telling him no. 10 out of 10, this guy was the greatest villain, I think, in all of cinema, and I don't think we'll ever see anyone top it again. So yeah, Thanos. Infinity War. Specifically Infinity War.
All right, Thanos in Infinity War, great start. Let's go to Justin. I won't cut him off this time.
Didn't let me do much to for any negative impact. And my dad, if you know him, big into comic books. Firstborn is his son. Big movie comes out, Spider-Man. Um, so that being said, it's gonna be Green Goblin. Just he's got the factor for me, just the motives. He doesn't mind a kill. He doesn't mind it being a loved one close to his arch rival, or just a regular old bystander. As far as I'm concerned, it can be anyone in between for him. Um, it's that presence that he has is just so intimidating, in my opinion, as well. He's got good gadgets, got good weapons. I'm not gonna fuck with a pumpkin bomb ever. No, he's not the caliber of Thanos, but for me, I was a young lad,
Right, so a villain that keeps somebody away from movies. That's a pretty good one. I like that.
All right, for my villain, I chose the Joker. Whether it be from the Arkham games, from Heath Ledger's performance, Joaquin Phoenix's performance, really it's about what the Joker represents, which is anarchy, chaos, and is a direct antithesis to my favorite protagonist of all time, which is Batman, who represents order and justice. And I think that them two clashing heads on multiple times and occasions has an overarching lasting impression on Batman that forces him to constantly have to reevaluate his circumstance to to prove to himself that he's doing the exact right thing. I don't think there's a single other protagonist that's challenged by their main villain more, and as well as how well the Joker is able to captivate on screen. Whether you're watching him in an animated series or it's voiced by Mark Hamill, it's Heath Ledger, Joaquin Phoenix, like I mentioned before, they steal the show. You're on the edge of your seat because you just don't know what's going to happen next. You can't predict the behavior. You can't do anything. All you can do is watch in awe as this person just directly and repeatedly challenges your protagonist to the point where they are so close to snapping every time they're on screen together that it just makes for absolutely captivating viewing experiences across the board. So I'd say the Joker and his relationship with Batman make for the best villain.
Good pick.
Joe?
Good pick. I like it.
Absolutely.
Joe, top that.
Oh, I shall, or at least I'll do my best to. So when we're talking about villains, I think we all know who we compare our choices to. When you're talking about presence, like being an ominous presence, a dark presence, if you're talking about doing deeds that are considered evil and scary for children, stuff like that, you have to look no further than Darth Vader. You know, this is the measuring stick for all villains that come out in movies since his arrival on the big screen. You can't top Darth Vader. His voice, you know, his weird breathing that you can put in like different camera shots. You can hear it coming before you see him. His dark red lightsaber that just he slaughters people with. I mean, he's evil. He's evil incarnated, and that's what you feel when you watch it. This big, cloaked, all in black figure. You can't see his face. It's just a mystery, so you don't know what he's doing or thinking. So he's just scary. He's the perfect villain in my opinion. So when you talk about the best villain of all time, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't choose Darth Vader to be the best. If he is in fact what we compare all of other villains to. So I mean, I think if you like look outside of movies as well in the comic books, you get to see a more in-depth sense of what he does that's so evil. But in the same time, you don't need to because you see a lot in the movies and you just feel it. It's something that you feel, you don't see. And I think that's beautiful writing. I think that means it's a perfect character. And I think it means somebody who's playing it, James Earl Jones, who is born to play that role. So, all in all, Darth Vader, number one villain of all time, in my opinion.
He hates sand. All you need is just a bucket of sand. He's gonna run away.
Yeah, he's
Too
saying
coarse.
he's like, nah, dude, I'm not interested anymore in this fight.
That's Anakin
He just needs
Skywalker. He's
some.
dead.
And Darth Vader rose from the ashes. I would agree. If you look at just like, I guess like threatening presence, you know, Darth Vader I think does set the standard for that. I think that's part his character, part the writing, and part his music his theme because it's just so dark and powerful. I guess my issue with Darth Vader as a villain is one, I wish he got more screen time, and then two, not really to the service of the character, more of the movie in general. You don't really get to see him in action as much as I would have liked to really solidify him as like the absolute best villain. I agree, he's like definitely up there, but I just wish you could see him in action more without having to like, oh, let me read this obscure comic that's kind of hard to find. You know what I mean? Like
It's
Rogue
true,
One,
but
Rogue One did
I'll
such a good justice, and I'll give you that. Like Rogue One
did
definitely
that was a
solid
good
it for me as
revival.
like he's a terrifying villain, absolutely. But before that, I was kind of like, oh, you know, he's like a good villain. But
I have a
I'm
take
gonna
that I'm
turn it
I,
back for a second, if I may.
on. I wanted to say
You
a
since
real
you picked.
take.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I say a take. No, I wanted to say a take real quick that I just am nervous to say around you. But I remember on the
Oh,
first one or two watch throughs of Star Wars, the first six movies, of course. I remember thinking that Emperor Palpatine was a more ominous presence than Darth Vader.
that's a fair point. If you
I feel.
if you go in
Yeah.
and you
mm,
watch if you watch the the prequel trilogy first, and it builds
Mm,
up Emperor Palpatine more, I would understand that perspective for sure.
mm. I
Darth Vader is probably the most iconic. I feel it because he's got the score, he's got the costume, obviously, and like Joe said, like the lightsaber, his voice, it's iconic. But that doesn't, I don't think necessarily means him as a character is not as interesting as others, or he doesn't challenge. Like I just don't think him from a story writing perspective isn't as interesting as just the things that support him. But he like was the
Whoa,
standard. Joe's right.
no.
He's the measuring stick, but he just isn't that interesting.
Oh boy.
talk about
All right,
takes
Ooh, we don't
being
have time for
fired.
this.
all right, Joe,
Just
just
say,
go off. Just go ahead. Just go ahead.
I was saying positive things.
So if you look deeper than what he looks like on the outside and you see what he's like on the inside, he's the most interesting of the characters that have been listed, in my opinion, obviously. Because he's my pick, so I have to say that. But he is a man. He's not the machine that you see that's been broken down and destroyed, who wants this power, he wants this darkness, but at the same time, it's what's killing him. It repulses him. And it's not about good and evil, black and white, as most people think. It's about how he lives in that gray and he puts himself there because this is what the universe has forced upon him. Like he didn't want these things, but he's the chosen one, and the Force is living its or having its will done through him. So he's kind of a slave to the will of the universe, and he's forced to live this life, and he knows it. So that's where his darkness comes from. And talk about all the loss he's felt, the pain that he feels on a daily basis, that armor that brutalizes him because it's not comfortable. The Emperor gave him armor that causes him pain so he can move deeper into the dark side.
hmm
So it's somebody who's being dragged into the dark, and he's also kind of holding himself there at the same time, but he doesn't quite know why. I mean, he knows why he got there, but he doesn't know how he's got so turned around. So it's like a big, long journey of how he figures out who he is and why he is where he is. And I think that's very interesting, honestly.
But we don't see that in the movies.
You do. But I just don't know if you did. I don't know if you picked up on it or not.
Do they say in the movies that Darth Vader's armor hurts him? Because I remember reading that in a comic book that he's in constant pain.
I don't know if they say. They say it in the third one, the third movie. I think they mention it, but I don't know if they mentioned that it was purposefully done.
Interesting. I will say also that
Like I don't know if the Emperor's like, eh.
I do think that what's really kind of like captivating about his, I guess, is his choice at the end, like before he dies, where he decides to turn back to the light. It's a good character moment. And I wish that they didn't bring back Emperor Palpatine because that really just makes it not as much of a choice. But
Oh
especially
yeah.
like he lived through that.
For
Yeah,
me,
like
that's kind of
I,
what
Yeah.
I
ruined
think
it for
that I
me.
think that if the Disney trilogy never happened, Darth Vader would be an incredibly incredible. Not that he's not already, but he lost a lot of his like cred as a very interesting character because the choice he made ultimately didn't have any weight on the overarching story,
Yeah.
It's true.
which I think is
Damn,
which I think
Disney.
is really
That's
Sad.
kind of all
underrated.
what
Yeah.
it comes back to every time is
It's always
fucking Disney.
bro. Fucking everything
Oh,
else.
The Mickey
Disney
Mouse.
is
Mickey
what it
Mouse
comes
is the
back
trash.
worst
to every
villain.
time. The
Darth
fucking
Mouse,
ears,
bro.
man.
He's a true villain.
Ugh.
Well, going back
He's
to
the true. He's
Disney, the one thing that makes Thanos better than I feel like the other ones is he doesn't want to do what he's doing. He just feels like he has to for the greater good of everyone else. Like all you guys talk
Ooh,
about is
fuck, that's a good
how
factor
your
too.
villains want to kill people and they want to be evil, whereas Thanos actively does not try to kill the Avengers. In fact, he consoles them. Like as he's kicking their ass, he's saying to Tony Stark, "I hope they remember you." Like consoling Wanda after the death of Vision. Everything he's doing is not because he's malicious or truly evil. It's he's seen, and that's why we talk about sympathetic villains all of a sudden. Like everyone feels like a villain needs to be sympathetic in order for them to be entertaining. And not only is he sympathetic, yes, but I think what makes him the best villain is not only because of how interesting he is, but he doesn't want to kill people, and he doesn't really have any powers. So like
I
the biggest,
love
he's
that
just really
factor.
smart. Yeah,
Yep,
he doesn't
I
want to
love
kill
that
people.
factor. Joe said,
Thank you.
Darth Vader is like, the villain he is because he was getting forced into it, dragged into it. If you could just remind me real quick on why Thanos is on this mission of because obviously he's like has that very, very firm belief of wanting to balance everything. Like, what
So glad you
instilled that
asked.
belief into him again?
He grew up on the planet of Titan. This is all in the movies. I mean, I haven't read
Yeah, I
his
just give
comic book
quick
history.
refresher for me. You know me.
In the movie, the basic synopsis: he grew up on the planet of Titan, where there was not enough food to go around, too many mouths to feed, and people started to starve because there wasn't enough resources for everyone. So he saw, instead of half the population sacrificing themselves for the greater good, everyone died, and he was the only survivor. So now he made it his mission that he thinks that the universe has a limited amount of resources, so he needs to wipe out the population in order to create balance, because we will eventually run out of resources, which, and also to bring it back, is a commentary on the real world, because not only does it work in the movie universe, but in the real world, one day
Yep.
we will run out of resources. So it's a moral question, and it's also the question of what do we do, because this is going to be one of the hardest issues humanity faces. And Thanos has a plan, and he has a will to do it. And yes, it sucks for half the people, but it's for the greater good. So he doesn't. He's at the end of the movie. He's sad. Like he doesn't when he's talking to Gamora, and he's like, "What did you have to sacrifice?" And he says everything. Like he's a victim of his circumstance, the circumstance he's creating, and he's actively driving the plot forward. So, mic drop.
My issue with Thanos' whole like escapade that he goes on is like it's all fueled in a most basic sense by delusions of grandeur and a hero
Yes.
complex that justifies galactic mass murder.
Yeah, I
So
think
like you don't show what they should have done is like him going to other worlds and like experiencing the same thing. But the fact that it only happened to his world means that it could very well have been just an isolated incident. And because of this isolated incident that he experienced, he murders trillions of people. Like you want to talk about
I mean he
he
talks about
doesn't want
that
to kill people, but
with Gamora's world.
he is the highest body count of any villain of any movie ever.
Thank you, thank you. Good point. Good point. But let me just bring up one last thing is that is also to think about. So the Infinity Stones have been in the possession of the Avengers, right? And like for example, Doctor Strange, a fantastic example. He possesses an Infinity Stone. However, in the movies, he's never used it to better the world. He just considers himself a keeper of the stone. Whereas Thanos is basically insulting the
Didn't he
Avengers.
use it to save
And
Earth?
Yeah, you should use it to
no,
save Earth from Dormammu.
he doesn't use it.
Like
He
a
doesn't
more
use it to
powerful villain
help.
than Thanos.
He doesn't use it to help the people of Earth in
Well,
like
okay,
everyday life. So
so
it's
that's not.
basically saying, "I
I
am
don't think
doing
that's.
what you want."
I don't think that's like a fair thing because he has the time stone, and you can't fuck with time like that because they tell you in Endgame how every time you use the time stone it fractures a timeline.
Doctor Strange, I dropped my ice cream. Oh, I got you, kid.
I got you, kid. Yeah, like I just think
We don't
that
trade lives
you
for
see
lives. We
you see it
trade ice cream for lives.
exactly. You trade ice cream for the health of a timeline. But I think that and you really see it
Easy
more
money.
on an Endgame where he like because he's not the protagonist of the story, if you will. He's more the antagonist at that point. You see him be a lot more malicious and a lot more evil. And it almost feels out of because I remember my experience watching it almost felt like out of character for Thanos to be acting this way. But then if you remember, it's all about perspective. Like we see through Thanos to see it, and you can kind of understand why he's like, yeah, we need to do something about the resources. But he takes it upon himself to wipe out half the galaxy instead of trying to convince half the galaxy that he's right. He just takes it upon himself to just murder everyone or murder 50% of the
Exactly.
galaxy. But it's like that. I don't. To me, that's not as. If you showed him actually going to places and being like, "Look what happened on Titan. Like this is gonna happen to you," and show like the roots of his failure that drove him more and more into doing this. All Thanos tells us from Infinity War is this is what happened to my home planet.
But
So
I'm arguing he's a villain. You're saying that would make him a good hero. You're saying that that would
I would
make
say
him
I would,
a.
but I think that.
I'm not.
But you're
I'm
saying that
saying
like.
that's why he's a good villain
But I think
because
that
he doesn't
it's
do that.
because like I guess it's because of delusions of grandeur, not like he's like I am. He's like I am the one. To me, is like I don't think that's as compelling as you make it out to be.
Tomato.
I
I
just don't
mean,
want to skip out on the Green Goblin here. I think the Green Goblin was a very low key, phenomenal choice.
Thank you. Yeah. Um, not,
That
probably
it was a
wouldn't even
scary
be
dude.
considered top 10 villains of all time. I
I
think it
would
would
argue after No Way Home, it could. He was good in it too.
true.
Like
Yeah,
you didn't talk
that was
about
a
that
good
as much,
revival
but
too.
yeah, no, he for sure. Like, can we just say he was scarier without the mask than with it?
And portrayals of him and Spider-Man is their kid show portrayals of that, and every portrayal that you get Green Goblin in, it's a pretty scary thing. So you know, um, uh, Star Wars 3 was the first Star Wars movie I saw. So when I say that Emperor Palpatine was more intimidating to me my first watch through, I watched Star Wars 3 and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I saw Anakin as little bitch boy Anakin. I hate sand. And then Palpatine is the one who transformed him in my eyes into Darth Vader. And I always found that pretty scary too. But can't argue that Darth Vader pick either.
I think that Darth Vader needs his own like movie where it's just him
Oh, it'd
going
be
through
Yeah,
that.
like
Oh,
that
the
transition,
critique on that would be wild, but that would be so fucking
just to
cool.
know like
well, is
you
that what
see
the
him.
prequels was?
So the
I
prequels is
mean,
him transitioning into Darth Vader,
Yeah, I
but
was gonna
you
say
don't.
that's Anakin Skywalker's
That's like
story.
yeah, it's
yeah.
Anakin Skywalker. You don't see like Darth Vader actually being like a fucking intergalactic menace.
Hmm.
And I think that's like I think you kind of miss that with him that I would have liked to
Yeah,
see.
and Joe's argument earlier was probably the best in terms of doing that, but we just never saw any of it. So if everything he said was in the movies, then yes, I would agree that that sounds like a really good character. But we just like you're saying, it's all off screen. So if we got that,
I'm
yeah,
glad you guys
I'm
said
on
that.
board.
I'm glad you said that because I was thinking about that because that's what Jake said early on. And I think he picked a character that leaves more things unspoken than done, just like Lord Voldemort and Harry Potter. The things that they're scary, not because you know what they're going to do, is because you have no idea what they're doing. You just know that they're evil. Like Lord Voldemort, I think was more scary in like Harry Potter 1 and 2 than he was in the last two when you can actually like see him.
I think it's just
When you
because he
just
didn't have
heard how
nose.
people no, it's when you heard how people were talking about him and
He
how
got beat by
afraid
a
people
baby.
were. Oh my god! But the same thing with the Joker. Like even in Heath Ledger's Joker performance, like you didn't see him killing a lot of people or planting the explosives or doing these things. You just knew like this maniac was out there doing these things, and you just had a gut feeling that sooner or later it was all going to go down. And I think having that mystery aspect to it adds to the evilness and the suspense and the enjoyment, I guess, in the audience. So I just think making everything so plain in view takes away some of the shine and from the mystery of the villain. So I don't think it would have been good to have Darth Vader been like, I'm gonna kill all these people. No, instead you're like, no, we just heard Darth Vader slaughtered a whole planet. And everyone's like, oh, and then you're like, you want to see it later on, and you're like, oh my god, I can't believe he did that. So I like the mystery. Like for the Joker, or for Voldemort or for Darth Vader. I like the mystery portion.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the mystery adds to it, but I think that Darth Vader's character as a villain only decreased the more Star Wars movies were made
Yeah,
outside the original trilogy.
Oh well, yeah. I mean, all Star Wars kind of decreased in value after the original trilogy.
Yeah, but I think that like you have Darth Vader, and you're like, but that's why I think that if you watch it in the time, like you're in the '70s, like yeah, that's probably the best villain. And if they left it like that, I would totally say Darth Vader is the best villain, 100%, because like exactly what you said, yeah, he has that mystique surrounding him enough that you're like, yeah, this is a bad man pajamas. Um, and it honestly would have been nice to like maybe his duel with Obi-Wan maybe not like been like well,
Oh, yeah, it was the time period, but yeah, you're
yeah,
right. I know.
yeah, and like but I think that because we know so much about him, in terms of like what he was before and the impact of his sacrifice after, it definitely decreases in value for me, which
Yeah,
is
I think
unfortunate, but
the prequels add to his complexity as a character. So people who like something like to really chew on to see how many layers are in this character, I think the prequels added to that. But all that mystery I was talking about, it took away that little shine to him. So now we're like, oh, we know who this guy is. We saw his whole life. Now it might make you think I feel bad for this guy and he's more powerful than I even thought. But at the same time, you're like, he's just a messed up kid who was kind of taken away. So I think it's a whatever you put more value in, complexity or that mystery will depend on whether or not the prequel is added or subtracted from the character's overall vibe, I guess we'll say.
I would say the biggest one I would be willing to give in to say which one was there in mine is the Joker, because as great as Green Goblin Darth Vader is, I think it's harder for the everyday person to see, have internalized them, because like obviously Darth Vader space opera, and the Green Goblin, he is just kind of like evil for the sake of being evil, whereas Joker manipulates people like Harvey Dent or so on, good people, into being evil, and so that's why he would have been my alternate choice, just because as great as Thanos is, like the Joker also is arguably has better, because I think the average person can see themselves. Like that scene with the boats, with the prisoners, and then the everyday people, the civilians, as they're leaving the Gotham on the two different ships, and he's like telling like which, like the type of psychological games he plays by having them like both have detonators to blow up the other ship's boat. I feel like that's something unique to only him, which is pretty interesting. So I would say Joker's number 2.
Yeah, I mean, if you like when you talk about kind of like the social commentary of like what Thanos represents is like where the Earth is heading to. It's like it's the same thing with the Joker. He's challenging the ideology of society and forcing them to come to terms with like, oh, no one is as good as they say they are, or as good as they want to be, and here's why. And eventually he's kind of proven wrong. But
which the Green Goblin kind of did that in No Way Home, which I liked because it didn't feel like a complete like copying it. But I don't know, like I kind of picked up like the Green Goblin in No Way Home gave like a little bit of a Joker vibe to me, just because he kept saying like we're gods, like this is what we're entitled to, like almost trying to Spider-Man, and I liked it, but still I think Joker's probably he's number 2.
yeah, so I mean, yeah, let us know in the comments who your guys' favorite villain is, or if it was from this list, or how would you rank them, anything like that. We love the
I
engagement.
dare you to rank them.
Yeah, I dare you to rank them. I dare you. Give us your top 4. I dare you. And honestly, we want to take some time on this already long video to thank you guys for the engagement lately. The comments have been awesome. The feedback you've been giving us has been amazing. And as our channel is slowly growing, we can't thank you guys enough for your support. So if you do like this video, drop it a like, or if you dislike it. You know, engagement for us either way. It's good feedback for us for future videos. And subscribe if you like the content, and tell us what we can do better in the future. And we're happy to implement those changes as long as they're realistic enough.
I think I've finally been in more third floor videos than Willem Dafoe has played Green Goblin. So thank you,
and
guys.
that's a triumph of your own fears. So
Hey,
who gets the last laugh now? Not the Green Goblin.
Yes.
Justin is now Willem Dafoe.